I should say, that some of you know that I've been cleaning my closet and in the office. So, a few weeks ago I found paint sticks and gave those out. And then I found, before that, what was it? Paint sticks. Oh, the pens. I found Sinai-Temple pens. So, Steve, I want to warn you that I found something in the closet today. Wacky string. Now, I don't know what I could conceivably do with this, but I think if you shake it... No, I don't know. It says it can be used indoors in a sanctuary. Shake. Oh, shake well before use. There is no expiration date. It's been there for a long time. Oh, here it is, 1888. Well, just in case things go slowly.
I am so afraid right now.
It's a little closer to you. Okay.
So here we are.
Hi, Stevie.
These are nice seats. I really like this. Why couldn't I have sat here more often? This is really something. It almost feels like if we were to just sit here and let the time go by, this last night never has to end. Wouldn't that be nice? Because people would start nod off and all that.
The Democrats tried that already in Washington.
That's right. But we have had...
We're here for a filibuster, surprise.
That's why we should sit on the floor. There have been so many opportunities for honoring Rabbi Shapiro, and I don't think we're going to do that tonight. We had a wonderful celebration a week ago. We had a great service. We had the religious school had a service. There are so many other things that are going on. But this is, as a matter of fact, when I think about that, I think of David Ortiz's last year. Just constant. So you're like our big poppy.
Thanks.
Yeah. So I do like the fact that I'm up here. This is very nice.
I can tell,
yeah.
yes.
Okay. But we do have some questions for you. And after, 47 and a half years, it's, is it?
Yeah.
Oh, it's not? 27? Oh, so
depends how the Torah counts.
So what are we making such a big deal out of this? So I have some questions for you. And by the way, there's a great video on the website and on Facebook where some real questions were asked, some really good questions by congregants that everybody can enjoy and watch over and over again. But I have a few questions for you. And I guess my first question is, 27 and a half years ago, you were deciding where to go. Why did you pick a cold, miserable place like New England when you could have maybe gone to San Diego or Florida or Barbados or something like that? What is wrong with you?
I did apply to those places. I was rejected. Next question.
This is going to be faster than I thought.
Well, I better say, no, I didn't apply. Well, we were living in White Plains, New York, and I had grown up, and Marcia and I had both grown up in Toronto, and the weather's not that different between Toronto and here, or really between White Plains and here. So the weather really wasn't a factor. There were more Jews at the time. Still, there were more Jews living in the Northeast. Well, Steve's in charge of the search committee, so the vagaries of a search kind of dictate where a person goes, at least in part, because if you're looking for a job, it only stands to reason you only interview at the places where there are job openings. And I did interview in a number of places. Did interview in a place, well, no, actually, I did interview I think in Maryland, outside D.C. I didn't, I should say, because just as things were winding along here and going so beautifully, that became open, and we did say, wow, the weather would be better in D.C. But then we thought, no, but we're not doing weather. We're not into weather. So I think that Sinai got me, Steve, who's in charge of the search committee with Jackie, in part because all that a rabbi knows when a rabbi comes to town, or two things: the way he's driven around town. So Behano wisely, very wisely, did not drive me through the X on on my first visit, and no one drove me through the X in subsequent visits. I wonder why.
He's never been there.
Yeah. So we always came at Sinai from Converse, never the other way. And I came in early May, or mid-May or so, when the dogwoods were out, and B drove me through Forest Park. So it was a good feint. It was very, very wise. But besides that, I think it really had to do with the quality of the search committee, really. Because the people you meet at the search committee, they represent what the synagogue stands for, and that was important. And I'll tell you just actually one other thing. There are many things, but I knew that the congregation was however old it was at the time, and I knew the building had been built in 1950, 51, or whatever it was. So my concern was the sanctuary. And I remember walking into the building and wanting to see what would the sanctuary look like, because it was likely, if it had been built in early 1950, it would have had no access to it, and it would have had, as it did, as it turns out when it was first built, I think, right? It was like a proscenium stage. You couldn't get at it, but it had already been renovated. Thank you, Stanley Davids. And therefore, it had this setup to it, and that immediately assuaged my concerns, because I was concerned if the sanctuary didn't work. I mean, I think I would still have wanted to be here as the rabbi, but when the sanctuary worked, I felt way better. And you might not think that would have occurred to me, but it did occur to me, and it worked, and the whole building worked, and it was the right size, and it was the right people. Turns out I was right, that you chose a good search committee, and the rest is history.
So you were impressed with the search committee, and impressed with the building, and
All's well.
And I know the search committee was very, very impressed with you.
Yeah, it was a great search
They were
committee.
thinking, oh, he might last, and you did. On another point, during your years here, a lot has changed in the reform movement. We've tended toward more traditionalism, and away a little bit from what we used to call classical reform. And you have guided us through that. It's something that you invented, but you've guided us through that. So now people are wearing kippot more, and talesim, and there's more Hebrew in our services. So what was that like? Was that difficult? Because I know you got some pushback.
Well, it's interesting. I do not remember the pushback. And some of you are going to stand up and say, well, let me remind you. But I don't. If you were to ask me, I would say that life is organic, and life has a flow to it, and I didn't come in imagining, well, we're at this point regarding how services are structured, and we need to get to point X or Y. Because I had been in Toronto in a congregation which had Holy Blossom Temple, which had very big, huge sanctuary, very formal services, and I loved Holy Blossom. I just hated its services. But I remember telling myself frequently, as I would go through these services that I hated, I would say to myself, but the reason you're here and the reason you want to be here is because you like the people. So no matter how they're worshiping or whatever, it doesn't really matter at all as long as you like the people and the place and the community. So I arrived in 1988, and the service was different than it is tonight. But what was critical was that the people were the people who they were. And then sort of, I would say organically, bit by bit, some things began to change. I didn't have a hit list, like we have to get to point X or point Y, but things began to change. But you may notice we did that Shalom Rav today that you've all known since about 1965 or so. That was a real old timer. It's still beautiful. It's Ben Steinberg's. Ben Steinberg was the organist in Temple Sinai in Toronto, where I grew up. So I remember hearing that when I was growing up, and I think anybody who's been in a Reform congregation would have known it. So we do new things, but we do things that are more aged. And I guess the change happened. I know, for example, with regard to the tallis cabinet that's out there, that was pretty significant. But, and I didn't check back. I knew Steve was going to ask this question, but I didn't check back as to when we did it. But I know that we did it, it came into my head. There was no groundswell, like, where's that tallis cabinet? But it came into my head, and I think I'm pretty sure that at Torah study, we studied the tallis and why it's worn or not worn over a period of weeks. And I think I probably did that with the board. And I'm thinking, now that it just occurs to me, someone may recall, I think it got voted down the first time, that we ought to have a cabinet out there for Taliesim.
I don't remember that. I remember it was during my presidency we brought it in, and what we did was we invited people to our board meetings so we could just listen to them and have them discuss it.
Oh, what great process.
Yeah.
How do you like that? So I think, I'm thinking we turned it down once. Maybe not, but I think we may have turned it down. But like Aaron, I came back because I thought it was important. That I thought.
So you do remember some pushback?
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, it takes me a while to get it back because my recollection of this is that things grew organically, and I believe you're right that whatever we did with an invitation for feedback. So I'm hoping to think that no one feels or felt left behind. Like, how'd I get to this point? I think that's what happened.
Let's switch gears a little bit. I know that there have been times when we're working together, we'll have breakfast in the morning and you'll be leaving to go do a funeral, and then after that you'll meet with some people somewhere, and in the evening you'll have a couple of committee meetings or a board meeting. And I know doing this tonight, I'm thinking about it all day, and I can only do one thing at a time. You're doing things all the time, switching gears all the time. How do you compartmentalize that? Can you teach us how to do it? Well, you don't need to teach me because I'm too old to learn new things, but maybe Nathan would like to learn.
So Nathan, here's the story. Well, it is true that if I went from a wedding to confirmation to a committee meeting, no one would say anything. I think the elephant in the room is if you have to deal with someone who's passed away, if you have to deal with a death or a funeral, that is more catastrophic and more difficult. So I think it's a question of time, and it is a question of compartmentalizing and developing some way to somehow make that into a bit more of a routine. I don't mean you ever take it lightly. There was, back in Toronto, there was one funeral home, and there was a fellow who used to drive the car, and the rabbi always used to go in the car with him, not the hearse, but there was another car. I always used to travel with him. His name was Bert. And Bert would tell me jokes the whole way to the cemetery, and he wouldn't stop. We would drive into the cemetery and he'd be telling me a joke. This I thought was a little over compartmentalized. So I remember have to say, okay, Bert, we have to stop now. Let's just quiet down and then let's open the door. And we would do so. So Bert is at the other extreme, but I take this very seriously. I think after a period of time, I guess it's a matter of survival, that you just have to develop the ability to compartmentalize, and that is the word, just to be able to do that. I know that this is going longer than you want, isn't it?
No, I was just going to say, so you did develop it over time.
I think so.
It wasn't something you right out of the cradle you could do.
When I was 8. No, not at all. Not at all. But it gets one thing I've told people before is that if I write a eulogy, then my catharsis comes when I write the eulogy. So if someone hears the eulogy when I deliver it for the first time, it's the first time they're hearing it. It's not the first time I'm hearing it. So I have the obligation, I listen to a family, and then I go home, but then I sit at the computer, and that's different. If I sit at the computer and I write that eulogy, then I'm very much in the moment, and I'm experiencing the whole thing, and I'm thinking what the family said, and putting it together, and trying to create an aura and write something which I think is kind of poetic, and just captures the person in the moment. So I think that's how I can manage to deliver a eulogy and do so, because I've been through it. So I had my own kind of catharsis upstairs in my study, just developing it and experiencing it, having that happen to me. So by the time I get here, by the time I get here, I've already been there, as it were. And I think people would not appreciate my weeping doing the eulogy. I do not think that would be helpful, because the point of the eulogy is it's not about me, it's about the event and the person. So it requires a certain dignity, I think.
Well, I think that's one of the most important things that you do, and we appreciate that. Art. We've got art all over the temple. You've always been interested in art. We have this wonderful tapestry. Can you tell me about that, about the tapestry? Why was that important?
I could tell you about all the art. I just love art. So the building had no art in 1988 to my recollection, or very little. And so it's just been great fun, seeing if someone wanted to underwrite something or do something. I mean, yeah, it has been great fun to just discover stuff. I'm going to tell you more than the tapestry. The piece in the back, which is by a man named Alvar, it's over the bench there that looks like someone's lighting candles or whatever. That was given, you have to check all the things who they were given by. That was given by Leah Gottlieb in memory of her son. And Leah loves art, and her son was an artist, so it was a perfect memorial for him. I just love that piece. When you leave, you should just stand in front of it for another 10 minutes. Just a great, evocative, beautiful, deep, gorgeous piece of art. And then the one outside the cantor's office was given by Joel Colin, Alav Shalom, in memory of Marilyn. And it was perfect because Marilyn loved lighting Shabbat candles. So look at that piece. That's done by a Northampton artist. We couldn't afford it anymore, but we could. And I love that piece. And then the triptych, which is out there, was given by Ruth Weber in memory of Ralph. And that one, for me, every time I walk into the temple, that's exactly what I think the temple is all about. The spirit and the love and the enthusiasm and the life of that triptych, the oil painting there, is everything. So every day when I walk into the temple, it's what I see, and it's what I hope anybody who walks through the temple. You can't miss that thing. It's all about what Sinai is supposed to be about and what being a Jew is supposed to be about. That's it. And then I keep going down the hall. Then down the hallway, you get to the tapestry, and the reason we're thinking of that is because that was done when Steve was president, and that was given to us by Linda and Jerry Wainick, as it happens. But I think what makes that thing, a couple of things about it. It was done by Tema Gentles, who's a Toronto artist, who began by weaving. So some of you remember between Passover and Shavuot, I wear a kind of orange tallis that looks like a scarf almost. That was weaved by Tema Gentles at the beginning of her career in Toronto when I knew her. And then I don't know how I have no idea how I thought of this thing. I have absolutely no idea. But I know it was a great opportunity for the Torah study group to study and to figure out what verses did we want on it. I can't remember how we came up with this thing, but I don't know, I spoke to her, we spoke, and we conceived this thing. And I came across the notes, somewhere in the notes, which are now going into the archives under a file called Tema Gentles Tapestry. She did write to me about some of the stuff there. I know some of the fabric is from a wedding dress of a neighbor of hers in Toronto, and it's all stuff from her life, all cut up and put together in that fabulous piece, which is Torah. And there are other pieces too. But
I don't think that there are many people in this congregation who would realize that a lot of the verses were selected by people in this congregation.
Yeah. It's on there are two legends there, explanatory notes, for anybody who bothers to read things in museums. If you ever do, it says it. It does say it. And every piece of art, I'm going to keep going because I just love this stuff so much, that this, I think the quilt from 1991 is just a fabulous, another kind of piece of art. It's people's art, right? And I think Beth Shafitz is there, and Beth did the quilt for us. And it's got a little square from every child in the religious school, age appropriate. They all did something about the holiday that was assigned to them. I love looking at that piece. And there are no more children in the religious school who are responsible for it, but I was with some kids recently who are older now and say, my piece is there. And then the tour de force of all this, just another one that Jackie Nyman and I worked on, is that great piece that's over the serving table in the Oneg Shabbat room, where we had every child in the religious school at the 75th anniversary, do a square with their initial, the first initial, their letter on it, of their name on it. And that one, then we had all the kids figure out significant Jewish values terms. I just love those two pieces. They, like the triptych, are what Sinai ought to be about. It's our children and their names and their values up on those walls. So, enough said.
Well, it's funny you mentioned the.
And I shouldn't forget that someone is from the sisterhood is going to say, "Are you kidding me? There's no art in the building." Right? Did anyone work on it? The needlepoint that's in the auditorium over the sliding doors. Excuse me, because members of sisterhood labored hard and labored long to create that. It was the inspiration of an artist by the name of Bonnie Yales, who was married to a wonderful rabbi in Lexington, Carrie Yales, Alav Shalom. And I have somewhere the signed piece of those who worked on it. I think it's now in a file in the archives, the signed piece of the women who created it. So there was art here. I take it back. And it's still right there.
And I think of some of that art represents a lot of changes to this congregation, to the physical space. And one of the things that was a major change was the renovation of this building in the mid to late 1995 through 1999, I guess. And that was an amazing thing, because it was the first of 3 campaigns that you and I have worked on together. I had never done anything like that. And the renovations, this was all gutted. This sanctuary, the lobby out there, everything was changed. The side entrance was changed. All that was done, and I don't know, I didn't know what I was doing. Did you? And were you scared?
No. Well, we had pros leading us, right? The first 2 fundraisers were done with a company that kind of led us through it. I thought it was an adventure.
That's the difference between you and me.
I thought it was an adventure. And then you and I volunteered to do the last fundraising campaign. We said, we don't need to hire no stinking professionals. We'll do it on our own. And that was just fun. And a challenge.
It was.
But that was great fun.
It was great doing it without them.
We had a great time doing that.
Well, I think we're running out of time, but I did want to ask one last question, and you don't know what this question is. I'm co-chairing with Jackie Nyman the Rabbinic Search Committee.
Go ahead.
Hold your judgment. And when we're doing our Skype interviews with these various candidates, the last question we ask is always the toughest one, and it always seems to throw them. And it really surprises me that it does, but they all kind of seize up. So we thought, well, let's ask you. What's the funniest thing that has happened to you here at Sinai?
Well, the first one that comes to mind, I can't tell you about it.
What if we swear everybody to secrecy?
Oh, right. What happens at Sinai stays at Sinai. The funniest thing. Well, I said this on the, it's not the funniest, I don't know, but it just comes to mind, I don't know. It just comes to mind at a time. When I laughed myself silly was when Emily and I, and Fiddler on the Roof, we made Hamantashen up here, and we needed a little bit of this and a little bit of that. We had flour, and we covered each other in flour, and we were unable to speak. So actually, Michael Gordon, who's making a film of this, I refer to this in the interview, in the other interview, and Michael found the pictures of it. So when it comes to just, well, I'll just leave it that one. When it comes to laughing myself silly and being unable to continue what I was doing, I think that's it, right up here, flower flying. We hadn't yet tried, We had
Cleanup
tried.
must have been something.
We had a thingamajobby down here. We had something covering that.
Oh, okay.
So I don't know. I guess that would be a time that made me laugh. All Purims have made me laugh and have a great time. And the most fun in the last Purim that we did was definitely our confetti canyon. So we have had Martin and I have had great times, and I've had lots of occasion to laugh. And I'm good.
As have we all.
Yes.
Those are my questions. I have two things that I did want to say. One was, thank you very much for letting me share this last time on the Bima with you. We should just try to let it go on and on, but we probably shouldn't. I wasn't able to be there at the first time you were here because that was before I was born. There is somebody in this congregation right now who's got a calculator out. No, that can't be right. But the other thing is, and I don't want to get into the whole big thing about how wonderful you are, yeah. But as we've talked about here with these questions, you've done a number of really big things for this temple. And you've done thousands and thousands of very important little things for all of us. And I just want to say what a great ride it's been for us. And I hope it's been a good ride for you.
100%.
Thanks.
Nathan stood up. Told that. Oh, by the way, I forgot one other thing. By this time, Joel Cohen, who would have been sitting, I'll have a shalom where Jackie is, would have done this to me.